The dust of Zareth Prime had not moved in 10,000 years. Sarah Chen stood at the entrance of the ancient structure and felt the weight of dead civilizations pressing down on her shoulders. The research team had been on this forgotten world for 6 months now, and every day brought more questions than answers. She watched as Vexthal, her Kryn research partner, ran another series of tests on the massive spherical chamber they had discovered deep beneath the planet's surface. The chamber was beautiful in a way that made Sarah's heart ache. Crystalline patterns covered every surface, forming intricate runes that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. A faint blue light pulsed through the patterns, like the dying heartbeat of something ancient and vast. "Nothing again," Vexthal said, his forearms moving in a gesture of frustration. The Kryn were known throughout the galaxy for their analytical minds and precise methodology. Described, if Vexthal could not solve this puzzle, Sarah doubted anyone could. Commander Thrace, a Telvari engineer whose species thought in collective networks, approached with her usual swarm of monitoring drones. "We have tried every frequency in the electromagnetic spectrum," she said, her voice carrying the harmonic undertones of her people. "We have attempted quantum resonance, gravitational manipulation, and even exotic matter introduction. The chamber remains dormant." Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders. The structure maintained a constant temperature just above freezing, despite having no visible power source. That fact alone had occupied the research team for weeks. How could something continue to function after millennia without any apparent energy input? Dr. Morpheus, the morphin scientist, whose gelatinous form could analyze chemical compositions through direct contact, oozed across the chamber. "The crystalline substrate shows no degradation," he reported. "Whatever the progenitors built this from, it does not age in any conventional sense." Sarah had heard stories of the progenitors since she was a child. Every spacefaring civilization knew the legends of the ancient race that had supposedly seeded the galaxy with technology beyond comprehension. Most scholars dismissed the stories as myth. But standing in this chamber, Sarah knew the progenitors had been real. The Galactic Council had assembled this research team from the finest minds across known space. 12 species represented, 47 researchers, all working toward a single goal: unlock the secrets of the progenitor ruins. So far, they had achieved nothing. Sarah walked closer to the chamber's entrance. The runes seemed to pulse slightly faster as she approached, but that might have been her imagination. Her imagination had been working overtime. Lately, 6 months in a research station on a dead world would do that to anyone. She thought about her family back on Earth. Her daughter Maya would be starting university soon. Sarah had missed so much already, chasing mysteries across the stars. Sometimes she wondered if it was worth it. Dr. Chen called Specialist Crix, a young Voth whose species prided themselves on pattern recognition. "We are preparing another activation attempt. Would you like to observe?" Sarah nodded and moved to the observation platform. The team had built scaffolding around the chamber, festooning it with sensors and energy projectors. It looked like someone had tried to gift wrap a small moon. Vexthal stood at the primary control console. "Initiating harmonic resonance pattern 773, he announced. The energy projectors hummed to life. Waves of carefully calibrated energy washed over the chamber, flickered slightly, but did not fully activate. Sarah had seen this pattern dozens of times now. A brief response, a flicker of hope, then nothing. "Increasing amplitude," Commander Thrace said. The hum grew louder, and the entire structure began to vibrate. Sarah gripped the railing of the observation platform. For a moment, she thought she saw the runes beginning to move, rearranging themselves into new patterns. Then the projectors overloaded. Sparks flew from the control console, and Vexthal jumped back, with a very undignified yelp. The chamber went dark again, Damage report, Commander Thrace barked. Her drones swarmed over the equipment, assessing the destruction. 3 primary projectors burned out, one of the technicians reported. The harmonic generator is completely fried. That is the last of our backup equipment. A heavy silence fell over the research team. Without the specialized equipment, they could not continue their activation attempts. They would have to send to the nearest council station for replacements. That would take months. Sarah felt her frustration boiling over. 6 months of work, and they were no closer to understanding the chamber than when they started. She climbed down from the observation platform and walked away from the team. She needed space, needed air that did not taste like recycled disappointment. She found herself back at the chamber entrance. The team was busy cataloging the damage and arguing about what to do next. No one paid attention to her. Sarah leaned against the smooth crystalline wall and closed her eyes. She was so tired. Tired of failure. Tired of being away from home. Tired of chasing ghosts. She let out a long, slow breath. The sound seemed loud in the chamber's acoustics. When she opened her eyes, the runes were glowing. Pulse she had seen before, but a brilliant, blazing light that filled the entire chamber. Sarah stumbled backward in shock. "What did you do?" Vexthal shouted, running toward her. "I did not do anything," Sarah said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were not true. She had breathed. That was all. Just breathed. The runes were moving now, actually moving, sliding across the crystalline surface like living things. They rearranged themselves into new patterns, forming shapes and symbols Sarah had never seen before. The chamber hummed with power. The temperature rose rapidly, and Sarah felt sweat break out on her forehead. Other researchers were shouting, running for their instruments. Commander Thrace's drones buzzed frantically around the chamber. Dr. Morpheus pressed himself against the walls, trying to analyze the chemical changes. Sarah stood frozen, watching as the chamber transformed before her. Eyes. The central sphere began to rotate, revealing layers upon layers of crystalline machinery. Holographic projections appeared in the air, showing star maps and equations and things Sarah could not begin to comprehend. Then, as suddenly as it began, the movement stopped. The runes settled into a new configuration, and Sarah realized with a chill that she could read them, not with her eyes exactly, but with something deeper, some part of her mind that recognized the patterns and understood their meaning. Only the breath carriers may inherit the keys, the runes said. Sarah's hands were shaking. Vexthal reached her side, his eyes wide with shock. "What did you do?" he asked again, more quietly this time. "How did you activate it?" Sarah looked down at her hands. They were ordinary hands, human hands, nothing special about them. "I just breathed," she whispered. Around them the chamber continued to glow softly, waiting. The research station's alarms began to sound. The energy readings from the chamber had spiked off the scale. Within minutes, the entire Galactic Council would know that something had changed on Zareth Prime. Sarah Chen, human xenoarchaeologist, had done what the finest minds in the galaxy could not. She had awakened the progenitor's legacy, and she had no idea what came next. The Galactic Council chamber on Station Unity 7 had never been so crowded. Representatives from 43 member species filled the tiered seats, all talking at once. Sarah sat in the testimony box, feeling like a specimen under a microscope. It had been 3 days since she activated the chamber on Zareth Prime. 3 days of questions, tests, and increasingly hostile accusations. Ambassador Krelix of the Sovereignty faction slammed his appendage on his podium. "This is unacceptable," he roared. "A junior species stumbles upon ancient technology and suddenly claims inheritance rights. The Council must intervene." Councillor Mirathen, representing the coalition, rose to counter. Dr. Chen made a legitimate scientific discovery, she said calmly. Her species has as much right to study progenitor artifacts as any other. She has more than a right, Ambassador Krellick spat. She has an advantage that borders on dangerous. Humanity should be restricted from all progenitor sites until we understand what happened. Sarah wanted to protest, but Commander Thrace had advised her to remain silent unless directly questioned. The politics of the Galactic Council were treacherous, and one wrong word could doom humanity's standing among the stars. Vexthal sat beside her, his forearms folded in a posture of meditation. He had defended her constantly since the activation, arguing that scientific curiosity knew no species boundaries. But even he seemed troubled by what they had learned. The research team had spent 72 hours analyzing Sarah's activation of the chamber. They had recorded every variable, measured every parameter, and reached a conclusion that shook the foundation of galactic understanding. Human breath was unique. Not just different, but completely unlike anything else in known space. Other species used crystalline gas exchange, photosynthetic absorption, methane cycling, or exotic methods humanity barely understood. But humans breathed in oxygen and breathed out carbon dioxide, mixed with hundreds of organic compounds. Moisture from their lungs carried traces of their last meal, bacteria from their mouths, cells from their respiratory system. It was messy and biological, and incredibly complex. And the progenitor chamber had been designed to recognize it. We must examine the evidence objectively, Counselor Severith said. The ancient scholar was one of the most respected voices in the council. Dr. Chen, please explain again what happened when you activated the chamber. Sarah stood, her legs shaky. I leaned against the entrance and sighed, she said. That is all. I was tired and frustrated, and I just breathed out. And the chamber responded. What did the chamber show you? She had not told anyone the full truth about what she had seen in those first moments. The runes moved, she said carefully. They formed patterns I could understand. They said, only the breath carriers may inherit the keys. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Breath carriers, Ambassador Krellick said. An obvious reference to humans and their primitive respiratory system. The progenitors designed this as a trap, someone shouted from the upper tiers. They meant to give power to the least deserving species. Or perhaps, Vexthal said, standing suddenly, they had a reason we do not yet understand. He activated a holographic display. My team has analyzed the biochemical signature of human breath. It contains over 300 distinct compounds. The mixture is chaotic, unpredictable, and varies from individual to individual based on diet, health, and even emotional state. This to Kryn respiration. The display showed a neat graph of crystalline gas exchange. Our process is clean, efficient, and identical across all members of our species. The Telvari use collective photosynthesis. Another graph appeared. Again, precise and uniform. Every other known species follows similar patterns. Optimization, efficiency, predictability. Humans are the only species whose breath is genuinely chaotic. Sarah saw where he was going with this. You think the progenitors chose chaos on purpose? She asked. Vexthal's eyes met hers. I think the progenitors knew something we have forgotten, he said. That chaos is not weakness. It is potential. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some members shouted agreement, others hurled accusations. Ambassador Krellick looked ready to challenge Vexthal to a duel. Counselor Severith called for order. 6 more progenitor chambers across the galaxy, he announced. All of them activated when humans approached. None respond to any other species. This is a pattern we cannot ignore. Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her again. 6 chambers across the galaxy, all waiting for humans. What had the progenitors known? What had they planned? I propose we establish an expedition to the origin world, Counselor Mira then said. The coordinates were revealed when Dr. Chen activated the first chamber. If we want answers, we must go to the source. Absolutely not, Ambassador Krellick said. Sending humans to the origin world would be like giving children access to antimatter weapons. We do not know what technology awaits there. Then we send a mixed crew, Commander Thrace suggested. Humans to activate the systems, other species to help analyze and understand them. Under Council authority, the debate continued for hours. Sarah sat through it all, watching the future of her species being decided by committee. Finally, Councillor Sevreth called for a vote. The motion passed by a narrow margin. An expedition would be assembled. Sarah Chen would lead the human contingent. Vexthal volunteered to join as chief scientist. Commander Thrace would command the escort fleet. As the council chamber emptied, Sarah remained in her seat. Vexthal approached her quietly. You did not tell them everything, he said. It was not a question. Sarah looked at her friend. The chamber showed me more than just words, she admitted. It showed me images, visions of the progenitors. What did you see? I saw them dying, Sarah whispered. Not from war or disease, from perfection. They had optimized everything until there was nothing left to strive. And they were searching the galaxy for something. For what? Sarah stood and walked to the massive windows overlooking the station's central core. Ships from 100 worlds docked and departed in an endless ballet. For someone who still knew how to be imperfect, she said. 2 weeks later, the expedition fleet assembled at the edge of Council space. 3 ships, the research vessel Discovery, the military escort Valiant, and the supply ship Providence. Sarah stood on the bridge of Discovery, watching the stars. The origin world waited somewhere beyond the edge of known space. What they would find there, she could not guess. But she knew one thing with certainty. The progenitors had left their inheritance to humanity for a reason. And Sarah was going to find out why. Vexthal joined her at the viewport. Ready? He asked. Sarah took a deep breath. The simple act that had changed. Everything ready, she said. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving the safety of Council territory behind. Behind them, unknown to Sarah or her crew, Ambassador Krellick watched from his private vessel. He had his own ships shadowing the expedition. If humanity was going to claim the progenitor legacy, he would make sure it was the last thing they ever did. The sovereignty would not allow primitives to inherit the galaxy, not while he still drew breath. The stage was set, the race to the origin world had begun, and the future of civilization hung in the balance. The explosion tore through Discovery's starboard side without warning. Sarah was thrown from her chair as alarms screamed through the bridge. We are under attack, Commander Thrace shouted over the chaos. Sovereignty warships decloaking off our port bow. Sarah pulled herself up using the command console. Blood ran down her forehead from where she had struck the edge of her station. How many ships? She demanded. 12, the tactical officer reported. Cruiser class. They are targeting our engines. The Discovery shuddered as another barrage struck home. They were 3 days from the origin world, deep in uncharted space, where the Galactic Council's authority meant nothing. Ambassador Krellick had played them perfectly. Return fire, Commander Thrace ordered. The escort ship Valiant moved to intercept, its weapons blazing. But they were outnumbered 4-1. We cannot win this fight, Vexthal said from his science station. Their ships are newer, faster, and better armed. Sarah's mind raced. They had come too far to turn back now. The origin world's coordinates burned in her memory, downloaded directly from the chamber on Zareth Prime. Can we jump to hyperspace? She asked. Not with our engines damaged, the helm officer reported. We need at least 20 minutes for repairs. They did not have 20 minutes. Another explosion rocked the ship. The lights flickered and died, replaced by the red glow of emergency systems. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone called out. "Sealing emergency bulkheads." Sarah made a decision. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel to the escape pods," she ordered. "Get them to the Providence." "What about you?" Commander Thrace demanded. "I am taking a shuttle to the origin world," Sarah said. "You cannot pilot a shuttle through a combat zone." Vexthal protested. "Watch me," Sarah replied. She was already moving toward the door. Vexthal followed her, his forearms grabbing emergency supplies as they ran. "You are not doing this alone," he said. They made it to the shuttle bay just as another explosion shook the ship. Sarah could hear the groan of stressed metal, the hiss of escaping atmosphere. The Discovery was dying. Vexthal loaded supplies, while Sarah fired up the shuttle's systems. It was a small craft, meant for planetary surveys, not combat evasion. But it was fast and maneuverable. "Ready," Vexthal said, strapping into the co-pilot's seat. Sarah launched the shuttle without bothering to request clearance. They shot out of the bay into the chaos of battle. Sovereignty ships filled the view screen, their weapons tearing into the Discovery's hull. The Valiant was holding its own, but taking heavy damage. "They are hailing us," reported. Sarah ignored the hail. She pushed the shuttle's engines to maximum, angling away from the battle. "They are pursuing," Vexthal warned. 3 fighters breaking formation. Sarah dove toward the nearby moon, using its gravity well to slingshot around the far side. The fighters followed, firing as they came. Energy bolts sizzled past the shuttle. One struck their rear shields, and Sarah felt the impact in her bones. "Shields at 40%, Vexthal called out. Sarah executed a maneuver she had learned in academy training, but never thought she would actually use. She killed the engines completely. The shuttle continued forward on momentum alone, while she rotated the craft 180 degrees. Now they were flying backward, facing their pursuers. "What are you doing?" Vexthal asked, his voice pitched high with fear. "Something stupid," Sarah admitted. She fired the shuttle's single, mining laser. It was not designed as a weapon, but energy was energy. The beam caught one fighter by surprise, cutting through its wing. The fighter spun out of control and crashed into the moon's surface. The other 2 fighters scattered. Sarah rotated the shuttle again and reignited the engines. They shot forward, leaving the moon behind. But the victory was short-lived. The fighters regrouped and came after them with renewed fury. "We cannot outrun them," Vexthal said. "Not to the origin world. It is still 2 days away at maximum speed." Sarah checked their fuel reserves. Even at maximum efficiency, they would be cutting it close, and the fighters would catch them long before then. "We need to hide," she decided. "Where?" Vexthal gestured at the empty space around them. "There is nothing but vacuum for light years." Sarah studied the scanner. There had to be something, some advantage, she could use. Then she saw it. An asteroid field, dense and chaotic, about 6 hours away at their current speed. "There," she said, pointing. "We lose them in the rocks." It was a desperate plan. Asteroid fields were dangerous even without enemy fighters pursuing you. But they had no other choice. Sarah pushed the engines harder. Behind them, the Discovery's signature vanished from the scanner. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. Commander Thrace and her crew, dead or captured. All because humanity had been chosen by an extinct civilization. The hours crawled by. The fighters stayed on their tail, patient and relentless. Sarah could see them on the long-range scanner, matching her speed. They were not even trying to catch up. They were hurting her. "They want us to run out of fuel," Vexthal realized. "Then they can capture us at their leisure." Sarah gritted her teeth. Not make it easy for them. The asteroid field loomed ahead, a swirling mass of rock and ice. Sarah did not slow down. She plunged into the field at full speed. Vexthal made a sound that might have been a prayer in his native language. Asteroids flashed past, some as small as her fist, others larger than cities. Sarah's hands danced over the controls. She had trained for this kind of flying, but training and reality were very different things. A chunk of ice the size of a house appeared directly ahead. Sarah rolled the shuttle 90 degrees and threaded between two spinning rocks. The fighters followed, but they were larger, less maneuverable. One clipped an asteroid and exploded in a brief flash of light. The other two fell back, approaching more cautiously. Sarah used the time to dive deeper into the field. She found a massive asteroid, hollow from ancient mining operations. She guided the shuttle into the abandoned tunnels and powered down. Everything went dark. Outside, she could hear the ping of smaller rocks bouncing off the asteroid's surface. "They will find us eventually," Vexthal whispered. "I know," Sarah replied. They sat in the darkness for 3 hours. Sarah dozed fitfully, dreaming of the chamber on Zerath Prime. In her dreams, the runes spoke to her again. Only the breath carriers may inherit the keys. But now she heard a second part, words she had not understood before. Because only the breath carriers remember how to live. She woke with a start. Vexthal was monitoring the passive sensors. "The fighters are still searching," he reported. "But they are moving away from our position. They think we went deeper into the field." Sarah made a decision. "We wait 1 more hour," she said. "Then we make a run for it." "Run for what?" Vexthal asked. "We are damaged, low on fuel, and hunted. Even if we reach the origin world, what then?" Sarah thought about the vision she had seen. The progenitors, dying from their own perfection, searching the galaxy for something they had lost. "Then we finish what they started," she said. The hour passed in tense silence. Finally, Sarah powered up the systems. The shuttle came to life, its engines humming softly. She guided them out of the asteroid carefully. The fighters were nowhere to be seen. Sarah pointed the shuttle toward the origin world and engaged the engines. They flew in silence for 6 more hours before the fighters found them again. But by then, the origin world was in sight. A green and blue marble hanging in space, surrounded by rings of ancient satellites. Sarah pushed the engines past their safety limits. The shuttle shook and rattled, but held together. The fighters opened fire. Engines. They were going down. Sarah angled for the planet's atmosphere, using gravity to accelerate. The shuttle became a meteor, burning through the sky. Vexthal was shouting something, but Sarah could not hear over the roar of re-entry. The ground rushed up to meet them. Sarah fought the controls, trying to slow their descent. They hit hard. The shuttle skipped across the surface like a stone on water. Once, twice, 3 times. Then they plowed into soft earth and finally stopped. Sarah's vision went gray. When it cleared, Vexthal was pulling her from the wreckage. Behind them, the shuttle was on fire. Above them, the fighters circled like vultures. But they did not fire. Sarah looked around. They had crashed in a city, an ancient city of crystalline towers and floating platforms. And every surface was covered in runes. Runes that were beginning to glow. Retreated suddenly, fleeing back to orbit. Sarah understood why. She was on the origin world, and it was waking up. The city responded to Sarah's presence, like a garden responding to rain. Lights bloomed along the crystalline towers. Floating platforms drifted down from the sky, arranging themselves into pathways. The runes sang. Sarah could not hear the sound with her ears, but she felt it in her chest. A vibration that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. Vexthal stood beside her, his eyes wide with wonder. "This is impossible," he breathed. "The city has been dead for millennia." "Not dead," Sarah said, "sleeping." She took a step forward, and the nearest tower responded. Its surface rippled like water, the runes rearranging themselves into a message. Welcome, Breath Carrier. Your kind has been awaited. Vexthal pulled out his scanner. The energy readings are off the scale, he reported. Every structure in the city is generating power, but I cannot identify the source. The center of the city. The towers parted before her, creating a path. Behind them, the crashed shuttle burned itself out. Above them, the sovereignty fighters maintained orbit, but did not attack. They were afraid. Sarah understood that fear. She was afraid too. The path led to a massive dome at the city's heart. It was the size of a stadium, its surface covered in more runes than Sarah could count. The entrance opened as she approached. Inside, the chamber made the one on Zareth Prime look like a toy. It stretched upward and downward simultaneously, defying normal geometry. Crystalline machinery filled the space, connected by beams of light that hummed with power. At the center floated a sphere of pure energy. Sarah knew instinctively that this was the heart of the progenitor legacy, the source of everything they had built. You should not go in there alone, Vexthal said. Friend. He had stood by her through everything, the politics, the battle, the crash. He deserved to know the truth as much as she did. Come with me, she said. They entered the chamber together. The moment they crossed the threshold, the world changed. They were no longer standing on a planet. They were floating in space, surrounded by stars. But not any stars Sarah recognized. These were older stars, dimmer, their light tinged with red. Where are we? Vexthal asked. Nowhere, a voice answered. Sarah spun around. Standing before them was a figure of light. It had a vaguely humanoid shape, but constantly shifted, as if uncertain of its own form. Who are you? Sarah demanded. I am a memory, the figure replied, the last echo of the progenitor civilization. I have waited here for 100,000 years, waiting for someone with breath. The figure gestured, and the stars around them began to move. Sarah watched as civilizations rose and fell. She saw the progenitors in their glory. They were not one species, but a collective of thousands. Beings of energy and matter, digital and biological, all unified by technology beyond comprehension. They had mastered physics, conquered death, and reshaped reality itself. They were perfect. We achieved everything, the memory said. We optimized our bodies until they never failed. We expanded our minds until we could think in dimensions you cannot imagine. We built machines that could create universes. And then we discovered that perfection is a prison. The scene changed. Sarah saw the progenitors in their final days. They sat in cities like the one outside, perfect and unchanging. There was no conflict because every disagreement could be resolved through perfect logic. There was no art because every possible combination had been explored. There was no discovery because everything was already known. We were dying, the memory said, not physically, but spiritually. We had forgotten what it meant to strive, to fail, to grow. We had forgotten how to live. Vexthal spoke up. So you searched the galaxy? Yes, the memory replied. We sent our scouts to every corner of existence. We watched 1,000,000 species rise and fall. We searched for something we had lost. The scene changed again. Now Sarah saw Earth. She saw humanity in its infancy, struggling to survive, hunting and gathering, building crude shelters, fighting against nature. It was messy and chaotic and brutal, and beautiful. You were perfect, the memory said. Not in the way we were perfect, but perfect in your incompleteness. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks. You chose us because we are imperfect? We chose you because you have not forgotten how to be alive, the memory corrected. Your species fights and argues and makes mistakes. You create art that is flawed and beautiful. You form bonds that are illogical and necessary. Your very biology is chaotic. Every human is slightly different, even identical twins. Your breath carries the fingerprint of your individuality. You are what we lost. The memory gestured at the chamber around them. This is our gift to you. Not weapons, though weapons can be made. Not just knowledge, though knowledge is here. This is the gift of potential, raw, undefined, chaotic potential, to become whatever you choose to be. Sarah understood now. The progenitors had not left instructions or blueprints. They had left something far more valuable. They had left possibility. But there is a warning, the memory said, its voice growing somber. Perfected ourselves and died. If you follow our path exactly, you will suffer the same fate. This technology can make you perfect, but perfection is death. Vexthal stepped forward. Why humans only? He asked. Why not share this with all species? The memory turned to him. Because humans were the only species with the biological key, it said. But that does not mean they must use it alone. The scene changed one final time. Sarah saw the future, or possible futures. In one, humans hoarded the technology and became the new progenitors, perfect, isolated, dying slowly from their own success. In another, humans shared the technology freely. Each species took what they needed and adapted it to their own nature. Kryn used it to enhance their analytical abilities. Telvari expanded their collective consciousness. Morphids explored new forms of life. And humans continued to be chaotic, unpredictable, and beautifully flawed. But together they created something new. Not a perfect civilization, but a living one. The choice is yours, Breath Carrier, the memory said. What will you do with our legacy? Sarah looked at Vexthal, her friend who had trusted her despite everything. She thought about Commander Thrace and her crew, who had died protecting them. She thought about Ambassador Krelix and his fear. She thought about Maya, her daughter, and the future she would inherit. Sarah took a deep breath. The simple act that had started everything. I choose to share it, she said, but not as a gift from humans to other species, as a gift from the progenitors to everyone. The memory smiled. That is the answer we hoped for, it said. Then take this knowledge and go. Use it wisely. Remember that the journey is more important than the destination. Forget how to breathe. The chamber blazed with light. Sarah felt power flow through her. Not into her, but through her. The knowledge of the progenitors filled her mind. But it was not complete knowledge. It was seeds, ideas and possibilities that would need to be nurtured and grown. She understood engineering principles that would take decades to fully explore. She grasped scientific theories that would revolutionize every field. She saw artistic techniques that would inspire generations. But she did not have all the answers. The progenitors had made sure of that. They had left space for discovery, room for mistakes, opportunity for growth. When the light faded, Sarah and Vexthal were standing in the chamber again. The memory was gone, but the technology remained. Vexthal stared at his hands. I can feel it, he whispered. The knowledge, but I cannot access all of it. Is like it is locked behind doors I must learn to open. Sarah nodded. That is the point, she said. We are not supposed to have all the answers immediately. We are supposed to discover them together. A sound echoed through the chamber. The Sovereignty fleet was descending. Ambassador Krelix was coming to claim the origin world. Sarah smiled. Let him come. She had something better than weapons now. She had understanding. She had purpose. And she had a choice to make. Ambassador Krelix landed his flagship in the center of the ancient city. 20 warships descended behind him, surrounding the dome where Sarah stood. His soldiers poured out, weapons ready. But they stopped when they saw what awaited them. The city was alive. Every tower, every platform, every surface glowed with power. And standing at the entrance to the central chamber was Sarah Chen, alone, unarmed, but somehow more dangerous than any weapon. Dr. Chen, Ambassador Krelix called out as he approached. You have violated council law by activating this site without authorization. Surrender the technology, and we will discuss your punishment. Sarah did not move. The technology does not belong to me, she said. It does not belong to humanity, and it certainly does not belong to the sovereignty. Krelix made a gesture, and his soldiers raised their weapons. Do not be foolish, he said. You are alone and outnumbered. Give me access to the chamber, or I will take it by force. Sarah took a breath. The runes throughout the city pulsed in response. You cannot take it, she said simply. The progenitors made sure of that. She gestured, and the chamber behind her opened fully. The massive dome split apart like a flower blooming. Inside, the heart of the progenitor legacy blazed with light. Krelix stared in wonder. Then his expression hardened. I will have that power, he said. He strode forward, pushing past Sarah. His guards followed. Sarah let them go. She stood outside and waited. The screaming started 30 seconds later. Krelix and his guards came running out of the chamber, their faces twisted in pain. They collapsed on the ground, gasping. What did you do? Krelix shouted. Sarah knelt beside him. I did nothing, she said. Chamber only responds to specific biological signatures. You cannot breathe it to life because your breath is not chaos. It is order, efficiency, optimization. The progenitors designed this technology for those who still remember how to be imperfect. Krelix tried to stand, but fell back. The energy he had tried to absorb was rejecting him. This is not fair, he gasped. Sarah felt pity for him. No, she agreed. It is not fair, but it is what the progenitors chose. She stood and addressed the soldiers. You can leave peacefully, or you can try again and fail. The choice is yours. The soldiers looked at each other. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. They had seen enough. Krelix was carried back to his ship. As the Sovereignty fleet retreated into orbit, Vexthal emerged from the city. He had been working with the technology, learning its secrets. Across the galaxy are all awakening, he reported. They are sending their knowledge to every species. But it is adapting. Sarah understood. Adapting how? For humans, the technology enhances creativity and adaptability, Vexthal explained. For Kryn, it provides new analytical frameworks. For Telvari, it expands collective consciousness. The technology is different for everyone. Sarah smiled. That was exactly what the progenitors had intended. One gift, infinite expressions. Each species would develop the technology according to their own nature. There would be no single path to follow. No perfect solution that everyone must adopt. Just potential, waiting to be explored. Over the next days, ships began arriving from across the galaxy. Not warships, but research vessels. The coalition sent scientists. Even some sovereignty members came, curiosity overcoming fear. Welcomed them all. She gave tours of the city, explaining what she had learned. She showed them the chambers and how they responded to different species. She shared the warning about perfection and the gift of incompleteness. And slowly, understanding spread. The technology was not a weapon to be hoarded. It was a library to be shared. A workshop where each species could build their own future. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the Galactic Council chambers once again. But this time, she was not defending herself. She was proposing something new. The Progenitor Legacy Project, she announced, a joint initiative where all Council species work together to explore and develop the ancient technology. No single species will control it. No single approach will be mandated. Instead, we will learn from each other. Humans will bring our chaos and creativity. Kryn will bring their analytical precision. Telvari will bring their collective insight. Every species will contribute their unique perspective. Counselor Sevrath stood. And what prevents this from becoming the same mistake the progenitors made? He asked. What stops us from optimizing ourselves into extinction? Sarah had prepared for this question. We stay imperfect on purpose, she said. We build in randomness, celebrate mistakes, encourage disagreement. We make it a rule that no solution is ever final. That every answer must be questioned. That growth is more important than perfection. The council voted. The motion passed with overwhelming support. Only the hardliners in the sovereignty opposed it, and even some of them abstained rather than vote against. The Progenitor Legacy Project became reality. Research stations were established on the origin world. Mixed teams of scientists explored and slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change. Human ships incorporated progenitor materials, becoming faster and more resilient, but they kept their messy, chaotic human designs. Kryn scholars unlocked new mathematical principles, but they applied them in ways that left room for intuition and creativity. Telvari expanded their networks, connecting minds across light years. But they maintained individual consciousness, celebrating difference within unity. Every species took what they needed and left space for growth. 5 years after Sarah activated the first chamber, she returned to Earth. Her daughter Maya was graduating from university. Sarah had missed so much of her daughter's life, chasing mysteries across the stars. But she had given humanity a future. She stood in the audience, watching Maya accept her degree in xenoarchaeology, following in her mother's footsteps, but blazing her own. After the ceremony, they walked together through the campus. "Tell me about the progenitors," Maya said. "You never talk about them when you are home." Sarah considered how to answer. "They were the most advanced civilization in galactic history," she said. "They achieved perfection in every way." "And it killed them," she added. Maya frowned. "Then why did they give us their technology?" Sarah stopped walking. She turned to face her daughter. "Because they hoped we would do better," she said. "That we would take their gift and use it to become more ourselves, not less. That we would remember the journey is more important than the destination." Maya thought about this. "Are we doing better?" she asked. Sarah looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, the origin world continued to glow. Chambers across the galaxy hummed with power, and thousands of species worked together, learning and growing. Growing. "I think so," Sarah said. "We are still arguing and making mistakes. We are still messy and chaotic and imperfect. And that is exactly what we should be." Maya smiled. "Good," she said, "because perfection sounds boring." Sarah laughed. That was the most human thing she had heard in years. They continued walking, mother and daughter, talking about the future. Above them, a transport ship lifted off, heading for the stars. It carried a mixed crew of humans and aliens, scientists and artists, engineers and philosophers, all working together, all breathing their own unique breath into the galaxy. In the central chamber on the origin world, the memory of the progenitors watched. It saw humanity spreading across the stars. It saw them sharing technology, making mistakes, learning and growing. It saw them remaining beautifully, perfectly imperfect. And it was satisfied. Legacy was in good hands. Not because humans were superior, but because they understood something fundamental. That life was not about reaching an endpoint. It was about the journey. About breathing and struggling and laughing and crying and making mistakes and trying again. About being alive. The memory began to fade. Its purpose was complete. But before it disappeared entirely, it sent one final message. Not to Sarah, who had done her part, but to all the species of the galaxy. The message was simple. Remember to breathe. Remember to live. Remember that incompleteness is not weakness. It is the source of all possibility. We were perfect, and we died. You are imperfect, and you will thrive. This is our final gift. Use it well. The message spread across the galaxy. It was written in the runes of every chamber. It was carved into the walls of the origin world. It became the motto of the Progenitor Legacy Project. And slowly, over generations, it became more than words. It became a way of life. Civilizations that embraced their imperfections flourished. Species that worked together despite their differences created wonders. And humanity, messy and chaotic and beautifully flawed, led not by dominance, but by example. They showed the galaxy that strength came from diversity, that wisdom came from mistakes, that growth required space for failure. Sarah Chen lived to see the first generation born with progenitor technology integrated into their lives. They were still human, still imperfect, still wonderfully, impossibly alive. She died at the age of 97, surrounded by family and friends. Her last words were simple. Keep breathing, keep living, keep being imperfect. And the galaxy listened. Thousands of years later, new species would emerge into the galactic community. They would find the chambers still glowing. They would learn the story of the progenitors and their gift. They would discover that the greatest civilization in history had chosen to give their power not to the strongest, but to those who still knew how to breathe. And they would understand that the Dormant Rune chamber ignited at a human's breath, not because humans were special, but because humans were alive. And that made all the difference.